As we come to the conclusion of this year's season of creation and head towards the full launch of the Laudato Si action platform, this is an invitation to consider the ecological virtues throughout the encyclical Laudato Si and the inspiration of St. Francis of Assisi for our daily lives. The season of creation concludes on the 4th of October, the feast of St. Francis of Assisi. This is also the date for the full launch of the Laudato Si action platform, which will be around with us for the coming 7 years. Pope Francis refers to the bishops of Brazil, pointing out that all of creation says something of God and offers us an invitation to deepen our relationship with God. Experiencing the presence of God in creation invites us to cultivate what Pope Francis names as ecological virtues, pathways to living the spirituality of Laudato Si. In 2019, Father Josh Kurithodum from the Vatican Department for Integral Human Development wrote a book titled The 10 Green Commandments of Laudato Si. In it, he includes a helpful reflection on the ecological virtues that are referred to throughout Laudato Si. He identified these 7 key virtues. While Pope Francis recognizes that laws and regulations are necessary to protect our common home, he also says that these alone will not bring about the lasting change that is needed. Personal transformation through prayer and living ecological virtues will lead to acceptance of necessary laws and, more importantly, a desire to respond graciously in recognition of what is needed to protect our common home. In this brief presentation, I'll focus a little on praise in the life of St. Francis of Assisi. As Pope Francis states, seeing God reflected in all of creation moves us to praise God, as in the biblical tradition, which is filled with references to praise of God for the beauty and wonder of God's creation. As urban dwellers, it can be challenging for us to increase our consciousness of being in and a part of all of creation that is trusted to our care. The title of the encyclical Laudato Si is in itself an invitation to praise God. In English, the encyclical opens with "Praise be to you, my Lord." The image on this slide here is of a contemporary sculpture of St. Francis positioned at San Damiano, overlooking the Laudato Valley in Assisi. St. Francis was steeped in the scriptures, and like many of his time, he would have memorized large portions of the Bible, especially the Psalms. His daily office of prayer and praise 8 times a day demonstrates this, as does much of his own writings, prayers, and letters. The whole of creation became for him an encounter with God. For St. Francis, Nothing in creation was trivial or worthless. All things pointed beyond themselves to God, their creator, as his sisters and brothers. St. Bonaventure was a disciple of St. Francis who, inspired by Francis, continued his legacy of Franciscan spirituality. And he writes that to describe coming to see God reflected in all that exists is like seeing God's footprints throughout creation. He is quoted in Laudato Si as teaching that contemplation deepens the more we feel the working of God's grace within our hearts, and the better we learn to encounter God in creatures beyond ourselves. San Damiano was an ancient little chapel built sometime in the 8th or 9th century. And it was here that St. Francis stopped to pray one day while he was out walking. While praying in front of the crucifix, he heard God call his name and tell him to repair my house, which, as you see, is being destroyed. The chapel itself where St. Francis was praying was in need of urgent repair. And at first, Francis heard God's call literally and repaired the little chapel and established a building where eventually St. Clare and her sisters lived. But as we know now, St. Francis' response to God's call for action extended beyond Assisi in a quest to rebuild the wider church of the people of God of his time. The call to people of good, all good people of goodwill throughout Laudato Si is to learn from St. Francis and also to take action that will protect and repair our common home. The tradition of blessing animals on the feast of St. Francis in many parts of the world is a small part of the Franciscan tradition of blessing. By gratefully acknowledging and responding to God's blessing on the whole of creation, and in sharing that blessing with others, we return blessing and praise to God. Being a blessing includes paying loving attention to the gift of creation, learning to tread lightly and humbly in our common home in very practical ways, such as thoughtful recycling and seeking more sustainable ways of living. Acknowledging and respecting our interdependence with each other and all of creation is a way of blessing. While lockdown has been hard for many of us, there have been some blessings that might stay with us as we move back into perhaps a refreshed and new sense of normal. Many people have taken up walking as a way of staying fit and well during lockdown. Walking even small distances is something that might continue and become part of our spiritual lives as walks of praise and gratitude. Even walking around suburbs and sometimes uninviting spaces. As you walk, simply take the time to pay attention to each of your senses in turn and offer praise and gratitude to God for what you notice. Being open to the caress of God through all creation is how Pope Francis describes coming to awareness that the entire universe speaks of God's love. In the current ecological crisis, Laudato Si has much to offer our world. With this in mind, the Laudato Si action platform was partially established earlier this year. On the feast of St. Francis of Assisi, it will have a full global launch with many additions to the existing website. The web address is at the top of the slide on the green section there. The platform will offer resources for all parts of our worldwide church and for the many people of goodwill who support Laudato Si. You are invited to pledge your commitment to develop a Laudato Si plan by signing up on the platform website. And you can do this as a family or as individuals, as well as you can see on this slide, the many sections of our church, the many parts of our world that are being included on this platform. For families, that plan could be something as simple as making a fuller commitment to recycling. It might also include a commitment to walking together and sharing what you have noticed as part of family prayer. Perhaps committing to learn together about some part of ecology or putting permaculture into practice. These are the 7 Laudato Si goals that will extend over the coming 7 years. The first 2 on the screen there, responding to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor, are both echoed in the Australian Catholic Bishop's social justice statement for this year and next year. And the statement offers many ways to begin living a commitment to the ecological virtues expressed in Laudato Si. And you can see the range of goals there, all the way through, including ecological economics, education, spirituality, and community engagement for participation and action. You may like to bookmark the platform website and check back regularly for additions to the site. The following concluding slides offer some moments for reflection with a version of St. Francis' Canticle of Creation by Dan Shute.
All praise to you, my Lord, in your creatures great and small. The lark that sings to waken us, mighty mountains tall, the sun that guides the day, the moon that shepherds our way.